I'm Kim Singletary.
And I'm Rich Collins with Biz New Orleans Magazine.
Welcome to Biz Talks. Each week, we reach beyond the pages of Biz New Orleans Magazine to bring you in-depth conversations with members of the business community.
From the names everyone knows to the ones destined to make their mark, we'll dive into the top issues, best practices, successes, and failures of every industry that calls Southeast Louisiana home. Hello and welcome to the Biz Talks podcast. This is Rich Collins. Today we're going to be talking to Mark Romig, the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at New Orleans & Company, the destination marketing organization that promotes the city's tourism industry. Romig has had a long career in marketing and PR in the city and is perhaps best known as the Superdome announcer during New Orleans Saints games. Thanks for being here, Mark. So a new report from New Orleans & Company says that in 2019, New Orleans welcomed nearly 20 million visitors, and those visitors spent more than $10 billion. Earlier this year, of course, the city had to shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic. The estimates are that we are losing more than $200 million of visitor spend in the city every week. Occupancy in downtown hotels is usually around 75% this time of year. Currently, it's between 5 and 8%. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, you just gave some pretty sobering numbers on a loss projection, and we did that as an average based on the spending that occurred last year. So we are in a predicament, but unlike Katrina and the BP oil spill, where the cavalry came to our rescue, everyone's in the predicament across the globe where they're in the same situation. So we're going to have to figure this out and raise our own selves up, as we will, but it will take a number of years to do that. As you know, we're now into a phase one launch of the economy under certain guidelines, and we've got to do the right thing under phase one to get to phase two. So there's a lot of personal responsibility there to ensure that we can go in that direction. However, operating under phase one restrictions that the state and the city have given us still provides quite a challenge to the restaurant owners and to the attractions and others that will need to get stood up again. Restaurants, most of those small businesses operate on very thin margins. They usually need at least a 50% capacity to break even. So operating at 25%, you can imagine it'll be a way for them to get their doors open and get some operations underway, but it's going to take some time for them to be able to get into a point where they can actually have enough business to stay in business, so to speak. The important thing about this too is to do it the right way to get these jobs back online. We've lost so many jobs. There have been men and women who have either been furloughed or laid off through the last 2 months, and as we get the economy back up, we want to be able to pull those jobs back in line. But we're not seeing much activity really for this summer. We probably won't see occupancy levels out of the single digits until we get into late August, maybe even September. And then again, Rich, that depends on how we do for phase two and phase one. We've got to keep our guidelines kept, and we have to do our job to ensure that we're keeping this virus at bay. It will be, I project, a 2 to 3 year period before we get back to where we might consider to have a normal tourism year like we had in 2019. Record year, as you said. Actually, the first 2.5 months of this year started off fantastic. We had the national championship. We had a very, very solid Mardi Gras. And then we saw the ceiling collapse basically in mid-March when everything had to be shut down.
As the city cautiously begins to reopen, how do you guys approach the marketing?
Yeah, so we have a plan in place to begin a methodical, soft launch of the messaging around New Orleans as a destination. We know that the traveling consumer will be very careful and methodical as well about what they choose to do. Because we have such an opportunity to reach out to what we call the drive market, we think that by going in a micro-marketing approach and slowly but surely reaching outside the city limits and inviting people who will feel comfortable getting in a car and driving into the city of New Orleans is where the consumer's mind will be. We don't, unfortunately, see people getting on planes for the time being. So it's going to be the drive market, I think, that will be our sweet spot for the next several months.
You'd mentioned in a previous conversation about a viral method of reaching people. How are you guys going to go about that?
Well, initially, it's going to depend on what budget we have available to us. Right now, our revenue is basically stopped. We rely on taxes from the hotel occupant. They pay into an optional assessment, and we receive dollars coming out of the occupancy. So when there's no occupancy, we're not getting any revenue at New Orleans and Company, which feeds our marketing budget. We have tried to keep some money aside in reserve for later in the year when we will launch what we think will be a paid media campaign. But initially, we're going to rely on our very aggressive social media and public relations, or what we call earned media, where we're getting stories written about what is happening in New Orleans. We have some great channels via social media, and we haven't stopped marketing the city. We are constantly putting out fresh content, reminding the consumers around the world the uniqueness of New Orleans, and we're getting so many wonderful reactions from people all over the world, telling us how much they love New Orleans and they want to be back here, and as soon as they can, they will be. And we're following some trends. There's going to be a lot of pent-up desire to get out and do things. However, we also know that it'll be likely in that drive market where we'll first reach out. So you won't see us advertising in Los Angeles or New York or Atlanta. We'll be messaging out via our social media channels and public relations to that I-10 corridor.
Do you know the percentage of visitors who drive in versus fly in on a normal year?
Yeah, about 50% of our visitors are drive market visitors. And that can be either a day tripper or someone who actually spends the night. Of the 19 million or so people that come to the city in 2019, you could think about 12.5 to 13 million of those actually spent at least one night, either in a hotel or with family and friends. The rest are people driving in, coming to a show or maybe to a Saints game, having dinner or catching a festival and then driving back.
And what's the difference between those two types of visitors? Is one more valuable because of spending?
Well, interesting. The meetings and convention visitor actually spends a lot more than just the leisure visitor. And that would be for things like all the parties and receptions and dinners that come along with a corporate meeting or a convention or a trade show. The last number I saw, the typical leisure visitor will spend 3 to 4 days here, and they may let go of about $1,200 per visitor. When you consider the restaurants, the hotels, if they're going to go to the casino or do something like that. Every visitor is valuable from a standpoint of whether they're coming in from Slidell or San Francisco, but the spending of the convention and meetings visitor is a little bit higher, and that's a very important business for us. That's a multi-billion-dollar business for New Orleans.
Hotel operators say their fall numbers look better than right now, but they're concerned about losing some of the business that's already booked if the rules about gatherings don't change. So what's your feeling about what's going to happen for the fall?
Yeah, it's hard to predict because it'll depend on the data and the decisions driven by our national, state, and local leadership as it relates to where we are in the stage of the pandemic. I think, again, it's like we have to prove ourselves, and we're proving ourselves hopefully in a very positive way with phase one. And if we do that right, and we can show that we can curtail this, and as the mayor's been saying, and the governor as well, box this thing in, we could hopefully have a fall that has these activities. I know there are still yet decisions to be made as it relates to the NFL and the NBA and other major events like that. But the mayor did make it clear that she did not want to see large festival gatherings in the fall. And again, I think we've got to not so much speculate as to what will not be there, but say that we're going to do our darndest to make sure that we can get back to some sense of normalcy soon. Having said all that, it will depend, I think, ultimately on where we are with therapeutics and vaccines as it relates to the consumer feeling comfortable enough to be in crowds. Now, meetings and conventions, as restaurants are, these are very controlled programs. So unlike a festival where people are dancing and they're all over each other, in a meeting or a convention environment, one could control that very well. You could do the spatial distancing, and you can make sure that the hand sanitizers are all over the place and that people are wearing masks, and that be part of the protocol. I think that they're still yet to see the guidelines for how that might look.
So maybe a meeting is easier to bring back online than a music festival?
I would tend to think so, though I'm sitting on the Resilient Louisiana subgroup around festivals, and we're looking at what are those protocols out there that we could offer up as advice to how you could maybe do some sort of gathering like a music event or a festival under the guidance of safety and health, and making sure that all the things are done the right way.
For meetings and things, is the way to make it happen by screening everybody and taking temperatures?
I think there are protocols that could be put into play. Obviously, people who are attending meetings, they're registered, so you know who's in the meeting, right. and so that you can check that box. And I think, like a lot of businesses, as they come back online, they're going to be taking care of the health and safety of their employees, and they will be ensuring that temperatures are checked. And if you feel like you're sick, then you're going to be isolated and sent home and sent to the doctor. So I think there are ways to do this. We just want to be able to provide some guidance and advice as our leadership, as they move down that road, so that we can show them how certain things can be done. The Louisiana Restaurant Association has a very strong program called Serve Safe, and it's a kit that shows restaurants how they should operate with safety in mind, guidelines, the hand washing, the gloves, the masks, and it's a complete kit on how to reopen and do this the right way. And it's not mandatory, but most restaurants follow suit because it's the right thing to do.
It's common knowledge that the restaurants rely on hotels, especially downtown. What is the state of things for the city's iconic downtown restaurants? I'm fearful that some of our restaurants will not be able to come back. We've got to go back to Katrina. Right before Katrina, there were maybe 850 restaurants in the city. We're now at over 1,400, and a lot of that has to do because of the success of the industry, of the conventions and visitors coming in, and people seeing opportunities. So they opened up restaurants, but they have been relying on the visitor, really, for the most part, to fill their tables. Well, us locals, we like to get out and eat, but by far, it's the visitors that have made this the restaurant boom that we've had. So what we see now is a situation where these restaurants, some have had to close so far, and I'm going to try to reopen. But it is except for these larger family-operated organizations that have several restaurants within their network. These are mom-and-pop businesses that have hardly any capital, if any, and operate on small margins. Is it true that we've been on a 13-year run of increased tourism?
Yeah, pretty much, except for that 1 year where it was somewhat on the flat side, and that was when everyone else went down. That was we had the recession. But for the most part, year-over-year increases, expansion of attractions, more hotel rooms. I mean, we were in the boom period, and even through the BP oil spill, when we had to remessage that we didn't have water on Bourbon Street, we kept growing and growing, and we were operating against what we had called at the time the Hospitality Master Plan, which is what the industry did right after Katrina to pull ourselves up. There were many things that we needed to get fixed. The airport needed to get fixed. We needed to fix the French Quarter, and that's a work in progress. But there were things that we pinpointed that we needed to do to make sure we could bring these visitors back. And it's all about the spending that they do. It's the spending is what creates the jobs. And so when you get more visitors and more spending, you have more job opportunities. So it was always running that as the sort of the goal line. Let's get to a point where we can create as many jobs as we can under the guise that people will come and spend money here. People saw opportunity. They opened up new restaurants. All the more reason for the National World War II Museum to keep expanding, and the Audubon Nature Institute with those great attractions that they have part of that, like the zoo and the aquarium and the insectarium. Everything just kept expanding, and expanding. The cruise lines started to come in more often. Disney, they sold out as soon as they announced they had cruises coming out of New Orleans this year. And then, of course, international, with the onslaught of the airlines like British Air and Condor starting to fly over to Europe nonstop. That was a huge win for us.
And how unfortunate is the timing that we finally had this new gateway to the city, and then things had to shut down.
Yeah, the airport did receive some federal aid in the last CARES Act, which was very, very good for us. However, a startling statistic that has been floating around, normally that airport will see about 14 or 15,000 people, upwards to 26, 27,000 people per day. Lately, it's been running about 500 people. So they're off about 97%, and it's just because nobody was flying. And the flights have been pulled back. Planes have been mothballed for the time being. So it'll take some time. Kevin Dolio at the airport thinks it's going to be at least 2 years or so to get back to where we were. But again, I keep stressing the fact that it's just not us. None of our infrastructure is broken. It's the people are the ones that are broken, so to speak, because it's either psychological, they don't want to get out because they're afraid, or two, our leadership has decided to handle the virus in this way and to keep everybody as close as possible away from each other and to deal with it from that standpoint. So it has depressed the entire globe's thoughts about travel right now.
Is there going to be a distinction between places that you have to go to, like major business centers, and the places that people want to go to, like New Orleans and other tourist hotspots?
I think consumers are going to be making choices like that. I think in the fact that New Orleans was always a preferred destination by so many people because of our culture, the food, the architecture, the music, that we will always be up there, and it'll be one of those things that people will want to come experience. People are experiential travelers. That's who really comes to New Orleans. Right. It's that person that wants to get out and explore, and I don't think that will change, and I think that will be in our messaging. But we will be ready when they are. It's not going to be this heavy-handed communication. We want to make people feel comfortable when they're here. We also want to ensure that they understand that our industry and our businesses are destined to be on the vanguard of the national protocol, so that we're at the highest standards of safety as it relates to what we need to do to ensure people that they can be comfortable while they're in New Orleans.
Have the aggressive efforts to fight the virus taken by the governor and the mayor helped your case?
I think it's a great story to share. We've been very aggressive with this governor, with parish officials, with our mayor. And also we've been recognized by the White House and the Vice President and CDC for being aggressive and getting the tests out there. We were one of 4 sites that were chosen initially to be doing the heavy aggressive testing, which was one of the reasons why our numbers were so high, because we were testing and we were actually getting to the bottom of what the issue was. So yeah, and we're going to be messaging that out because, again, consumers are going to be looking at all these destinations to see who's still hot and who's not, and who's handling it the right way, and who's being aggressive with the guidelines, and people are taking responsibility. And we want to show that we can do it. New Orleanians have been through a lot, and we've always come out of it better, and we're going to come out of this much better.
Is part of the job of someone in your business to get the message out about the city and then also deal with whatever disaster seems to come along every few years?
Yeah, it is a daily communication process, because whether it's something that unfortunately someone is the victim of a crime and that story goes national, though there are victims of crime all over the United States, but again, it seems to get elevated when it's in New Orleans. And we have to deal with the message that comes back to us from people asking questions. But we're not at all shy about ensuring that people know that we have the visitors' safety as a number one priority. But yes, it's a daily occurrence for us messaging. New Orleans and Company, as a destination marketing organization, works for the industry, and it's very competitive. There are DMOs, as we call ourselves, all over in every city. And they're doing the same thing that we're doing. They're trying to get people to come spend money in that city. And so we're fighting with the DMO from Orlando, from Dallas, from Austin, from Nashville, from Charleston, trying to put our message out so that people make the decision to spend money out of their wallet here.
Right. If I can, I want to steer back to restaurants for a second. You mentioned that we've increased the number of restaurants in the city by 75% in the last 15 years or so. Do you think we are going to lose a percentage of those again because of current circumstances?
You know, Rich, I hate to speculate because I want everybody to come back. A lot of it's going to depend on the workers, the employees who are available to come back as well. Folks are in a tough spot right now, and some people may decide they're going to get out of the industry and do something else. It's still too early to really put a number on that. I'm hopeful that we can all get this back and we can be bigger and better than we were before. We're committed to that. We're committed to ensuring that we can get that spending started back here. 43% of the city's budget comes out of the retail tax that is spent by visitors and related activities. The city depends on tourism, probably too much, but that's who we are and that's what we are as a city.
Can you explain a little bit about what happened at the beginning of this year when the New Orleans Tourism and Marketing Corporation and the former Convention and Visitors Bureau have officially joined forces and become New Orleans and Company?
New Orleans and Company is a rebranded New Orleans Convention and Visitors Bureau. It's the CVB, but it went the way of other destination marketing organizations to kind of represent more of what they do. It's more about just conventions and visitors. It's all about the industry. So New Orleans and Company was born. And it's the tagline, it's the official destination marketing organization for the tourism industry in New Orleans. Last year, in the agreement that was made between the city of New Orleans and the state and the industry, the marketing dollars would be reevaluated, and some of those dollars that are created through the taxes would go directly to the city for infrastructure issues. And then the marketing of the industry would be consolidated over into New Orleans and Company. So I was with New Orleans Tourism Marketing Corporation. It was the leisure travel marketing group for the industry, but it was a quasi-city agency. The mayor decided that she didn't want to get into the marketing of the city. She wanted to let New Orleans and Company focus on marketing. So my entire marketing team went over and started working with New Orleans and Company January 1st. Recently, New Orleans Tourism Marketing Corporation was changed into the New Orleans Tourism and Culture Fund, and its board is being reconfigured, right. And it's still going to receive the occupancy privilege tax to help fund those issues that they will handle. But all the marketing of the city industry went over to New Orleans and Company.
Did I hear correctly at an event earlier this year when I heard some industry people talking about 2020 being flat compared to the last couple of years?
Yeah, there was a projection going into the new year that we may have been running into the beginning of a flattening. It was just what we saw out there as, was it going to be a recession coming? People were kind of guessing, the next couple of years, things are changing, and we just needed to be ready for it, but no one anticipated the change like this.
How important is it for us to avoid a second spike?
Well, everything is predicated on us getting through this and trying to get back to some sort of sense of normalcy over the next couple of years. A second wave and a hard hit where we're back in the same situation and we have to start shutting down again would be disastrous for us. I think we've got to do what we can do to ensure that we don't have that second wave. I mean, someone said the other day that this virus is not going away. It will always be here. It'll always be with us. But what we can do is get that vaccine, get those therapeutics so that we can manage it and be able to start living life at least as we used to know it. But you're right, we've got to be very careful. And that's why it's important to start these habits now so that when it comes to the fall, it's not unusual that we're wearing our masks and we're keeping our distance and we're not shaking hands, we're washing our hands and doing things like that.
Since New Orleans essentially hosts people professionally, do you think we can be at the cutting edge of figuring out how to do this in the new normal?
I think so. I think given the opportunity for us to engineer the right way to do large groups and gatherings, through the governor's Resilient Louisiana Task Force and the subgroups that are working with him, providing advice and guidance on how that might look with the right medical experts weighing in. We ought to give it a shot, and again, do it responsibly. This is the antithesis of hospitality, is what we're going through. Hospitality is all about being together, and so it behooves us to kind of try to figure this out. This is our moonshot, right? This is our Apollo moonshot to get this right and do it right. Bring all the best minds together and make it happen.
There's a lot of speculation about the start of the NFL season and whether or not there will be fans in attendance. In your role as Superdome announcer, what are you hearing? What are you hoping?
Rich, I am not hearing anything, and I don't want to even get involved in that conversation. So above my pay grade. I love the Saints, and it would be we have to wait for the leadership of the NFL to make their decisions in conjunction with each of the states that they operate in, right? But I know how much it means to the fans to be there, and I know how much it means to the players to know that their fans are rooting for them in the stands. I'm sure the NFL is going to make the right decision, and at some point we'll be all together again. I just don't have any sense when that might be.
Do you think if they decide to do some games without fans in attendance that you'd still be in there calling the plays?
Rich, again, I have not been given any direction. My fingers are crossed, and I would love to be able to be there to yell first down Saints and it's good and touchdown Saints and there's a flag on the play, all those great things. But I'm sure the right decisions will be made on that, and I'll be ready to go whenever they need me. I know I look at my dad and in all the years that he did it, and as my mom says, there are only two seasons. There's waiting for Saints season and Saints season. So it's in our blood, and I'll be a good soldier and do whatever they would like me to do, and pull for the Saints.
Okay, we should end on a positive note. Do you have any thoughts on how this may play out and about our city's resilience?
Oh, we will come back, and we'll come back stronger. We'll re-engineer a lot of things. I think the state of the industry will pull together in a very, very strong way. I think we'll re-engineer a lot of ways that we do things, and things might look a little different, and we may operate a little differently. But this city is 302 years old, and I don't see us going away.